You ever see a big problem in society and wonder, how does a government actually go about fixing that? How does a concern, just an idea, turn into a real plan with a budget and people in charge? Well, it's not magic, it's a process. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that exact journey using a really powerful real-world example from Ireland. All right, let's get into it. So here's our roadmap. We're going to follow the exact path of this one policy. First up, how does a problem even get noticed? Then, how do you actually design the solution? After that, we'll see how the plan gets put into action. We'll even check their report card to see how they measured success. And finally, we'll see how this one story reveals a universal blueprint for how change really happens. Okay, so we start at the very beginning with something called agenda setting. Think of this as the first absolutely crucial stage. It's where a problem becomes so visible, so undeniable that policymakers just can't look away anymore. The whole goal here? Make the problem completely impossible to ignore. So what was the big problem brewing in Ireland back then? Why on earth did the health of men suddenly become a national priority? Well, the answer wasn't just a vague feeling, it was right there in the hard data that became available for everyone to see. Check this out. This chart tells a huge story. Back in 2005, the average man in Ireland was expected to live to be about 77. For women, it was almost 82. Now, that gap, nearly 5 years, wasn't just a random number. It was a massive red flag that something much deeper was going on with men's health. And the evidence just kept piling up. When they dug a little deeper, the data showed that a staggering 2/3 of all men in Ireland were either overweight or obese. We're not talking about a minor issue here. This was a widespread health crisis hitting a huge chunk of the population.
And it went beyond diet. They also found these patterns of risk-taking. For example, men were up to 3 times more likely than women to use illegal drugs. This pointed to a really complex mix of social pressures and behaviors that were leading to these poor health outcomes.
So here's the key takeaway for this first stage. It was the availability of this clear, compelling data on life expectancy, obesity, risk-taking that forced the issue. You couldn't argue with it. The problem was now defined, it was quantified, and it was officially on the government's to-do list. Stage 1, complete. All right, so the problem is officially on the agenda. Now we move to the next stage, formulation. This is where the real design work happens. It's all about researching, talking to experts, consulting with the public, and drafting the actual blueprint for action. And this just shows you that good policy isn't rushed. I mean, this was not a weekend project. This was a deliberate 5-year process. It involved deep research, bringing in experts, holding a national conference, and doing a massive review of all the available evidence. They took their time to get it right. Now, to make sure this policy would actually work in the real world, they made the process widely available to the public. They went out into communities, held health days, ran focus groups with men whose voices often get missed, and even put out a public call for anyone to send in their ideas. And that's so important, right? Because policies that affect you should be shaped by you. And because they listened, they heard things just like this. This quote, this incredibly raw and honest quote from a participant, it just shows you what they were really up against. It wasn't just about telling people to eat their vegetables. It was about tackling these deeply ingrained cultural ideas about what it meant to be a man, where binge drinking was seen as a badge of honor. So, you've got a problem and you've designed a solution. Now for stage 3, adoption and implementation. This is where the plan gets the official green light and, more importantly, it gets turned from a document into real-world action. This is the let's do this phase. To put it simply, implementation is the bridge that connects the promise to the reality. It's all about assigning tasks, setting deadlines, and making sure everyone knows exactly who is responsible for what. Because without this, a policy is really just a bunch of nice words on a page. In this table, this is what that accountability looks like in practice. A really strong policy has a detailed action plan just like this one. You can see every recommendation is tied to a specific action and, this is the critical part, a lead agency. So you want to reduce school bullying? The Department of Education is on it. You need more safe social spaces? The Department of Sport is taking the lead. There's no finger pointing, no ambiguity. But wait, how do you know if any of this stuff is actually working? Well, that brings us to the final and maybe the most important stage of the whole cycle, evaluation. This is where you give the policy its report card. Did it pass or fail? What's so smart about this policy is that evaluation wasn't an afterthought. They literally built accountability right into its DNA from day one. They planned to get baseline data so they could measure change. They created a committee to watch over everything. They promised to stay up to date with new research, and they even required an independent evaluation after 3 years. That is how you commit to getting results. Okay, so we've followed the entire journey of one specific policy in Ireland. But the big lesson here, the reason we're talking about it, is that the framework they used is completely universal. So let's zoom out for a second and look at that core blueprint. And here it is, the entire process in 4 essential stages. It's so simple when you see it laid out. First, you identify the problem and get it on the agenda. Second, you formulate a smart solution based on evidence. Third, you implement that solution with clear accountability. And fourth, you evaluate the outcome to see if you actually fix the thing you set out to fix. And the big takeaway here is that this cycle isn't just for men's health in Ireland. You can think of it as the basic operating system for public problem solving. Whether the challenge is climate change or education or housing, this structured approach is how societies everywhere try to tackle their biggest challenges. And that leaves us with one last thought. Now that you've seen the blueprint, this whole journey from a problem to a real action, start looking for it around you. How are the policies that affect your life being made? Who's being consulted? How are they measuring success? The answers might just surprise you.